Black Pygmies in Australia. In 1896, an anonymous article entitled The Ethnology of the Australian Blacks, published in the Australasian Anthropological Journal, proposed that Australia's first indigenous population was a group of black pygmies who had migrated from Southeast Asia. He also claimed that subsequently Papuan people entered both Indonesia and Australasia, and, quote, there many of the Negrito men were killed by them, end quote, saying that the women were spared as wives, and that these pygmy people became extinct as a result. This account appears to be the first instance of the claim that the original inhabitants of Australia were a black pygmy people who were displaced by black Papuan people who entered Australia, exterminated the black pygmies, and became the Australian Aboriginal people who have occupied the continent ever since. In 1899, this view received further support from Australian Aboriginal oral history. John Matthews' book Eagle, Hawk and Crow, a study of the Australian Aborigines, including an inquiry into their origin and a survey of Australian languages, sought to identify the origin of the Australian Aboriginals through a close reading of their own cultural narratives. Matthew took Aboriginal oral history very seriously and considered that even the Aboriginal mythology contained valuable and accurate historical information about their deep past. During the 1930s, this theory received even greater support from the work of anthropologists Norman Tyndale and Joseph Birdsall, who identified what they believed was a group of Pygmy people living in northern Queensland who were ethnically distinct from the Australian Aboriginal population. Professor Russell McGregor, former lecturer in history at James Cook University in Australia, explained that Tyndale and Birdsall believed this group of Pygmy people were, quote, relicts of the first human occupants of Australia, refugees from later waves of Aboriginal invaders who seized all but the most inhospitable parts of the continent, end quote. This theory was readily accepted by Australian and European historians. In an article entitled, quote, The Extinction of the Australian Pygmies, published in 2002, Keith Windschuttle and Tim Gillen write that, quote, from the 1940s until the 1960s, it was fairly widely known there were Pygmies in Australia, end quote. McGregor provides evidence supporting this claim, writing that in 1962, a Dr. R.A. Douglas, quote, not only presented a paper entitled Pygmies in Australia, he also presented to delegates a real pygmy, end quote, apparently from far north Queensland. Windschuttle and Gillen say that, quote, this was a fact recorded at the time not only in anthropological textbooks and articles, but also in popular books about the Australian Aborigines, end quote. They add, quote, the more famous photographs of the Australian Pygmies were reproduced in both the academic and the popular literature. At the time, there was controversy about their origins, but not over the fact of their existence, end quote. Sinologist Ted Rule's article, The Enigma of the Australian Pygmies, published in 2010, cites the book Pygmonia, In Search of the Secret Land of the Pygmies, by Peter McAllister of the University of Queensland, published in 2010, saying, quote, McAllister gives us ample evidence of the existence of a group of significantly small people living round Cairns 70 years ago, end quote. Scholarly views on this subject definitively changed near the end of the 20th century, when the Black Pygmy thesis virtually disappeared from scholarly commentary and historical work. Windschuttle and Gillen find this curious, writing, quote, no one today with a lay interest in Aboriginal anthropology, and few of those doing introductory courses in the subject, would ever find out that Australia had a Pygmy people. What, then, has been going on? Why would these people have been expunged from popular memory? How did the Australian Pygmies become extinct within the public consciousness? End quote.
Our cameramen have been down under, and there they found a little lady who starved. Okay, boys, you can come up and see her anytime.